What's going on, everybody? And welcome back to College Football Red Zone, where I go ahead and take a holistic look at all 138 FBS programs entering the 2026 college football season. And this iteration of the First Look series is going to take us into the mountains of the Big 12, where I will be talking some West Virginia football. The Mountaineers do come in as my 61st ranked team in college football, led by the man, the myth, the legend, in Rich Rodriguez. So, very excited to talk about Rich Rodriguez in this one. So, hopefully, you guys are intrigued by some West Virginia football here in this one as we're approaching our top 60 now. And if you've been enjoying this series holistically, I need you to do a couple of favors for me real fast. Hit that like button and then also hit that subscribe button as well if you do happen to be brand new to the channel. And so, with that being said, let's go ahead and get into things here. I mean, we got to start things out with Rich Rodriguez. And combining his two stints here at West Virginia, he's entering year number 9. And, he's 64 and 34 in his overall record, with obviously most of that success coming on the first time around, where he led West Virginia to multiple Big East titles way back in 2003 through 2005. Also won the Big East title in 2007 before taking the Michigan head coaching job. And I'm sure it has been documented that obviously things didn't work out at Michigan as part of the reason why, Michigan took part in was considered one of the biggest upsets in college football history. Did have a reclamation project, was coaching at Jacksonville State, and he led Jacksonville State for the FBS transition, and it was a very successful transition, which eventually led to the Gamecocks winning the CUSA title a couple of years ago before taking the head coaching job at West Virginia. And so while this first year at West Virginia hasn't gone too terribly well, he did bring in yet another crop of transfer portal guys. One of the higher ranked transfer portal classes, but it's a lot of guys that they brought in. We're talking about around 30 to 35 guys total. So when you have a transfer portal class that big, you really wonder how is the team going to gel in general, especially when you're talking about at least a third of your roster being replaced with guys from a bunch of different programs and a bunch of different systems. But I will say this roster on paper, if we are playing this out purely on EA college football, this is going to be a better roster on paper than what Rich Rod had to work with in his first year, and hopefully gets to a point where he doesn't have to rely so heavily on the transfer portal like he's had in his first couple of years in Morgantown, West Virginia. Now, I am concerned about how things are going to look on the perimeter, losing Cam Vaughn to Miami. And Cam Vaughn was a pretty special player. He's going to play for the Miami Hurricanes and, is going to be playing next to Malachi Tony. But that doesn't really help the Mountaineers, especially in terms of, who is, any future quarterback going to throw this football to. They did bring in DJ Epps. DJ Epps from Troy, 550 total yards, 5 touchdowns last year. Good receiver. Don't know and don't think that he's going to be on the same level as a Cam Vaughn, though. So, I am a little concerned about who is going to step up as that wide receiver one. Although I do think that they at least brought in a starting caliber receiver in DJ Epps out of Troy. Beyond that, though, I do think that this is going to team that's going to lean a little bit more on the running game, though. That is a hallmark of a Rich Rodriguez offense, especially if you saw him coach at Jacksonville State prior to him taking his West Virginia job. His offenses have pretty much always been predicated on that rushing attack, and he has a guy that could execute that offensive philosophy perfectly in Cam Cook. I am so excited to watch him play. Transferring in from Jacksonville State, dude had almost 2,000 yards at 16 touchdowns last year. Like, that dude is incredible. I cannot wait to watch Cam Cook play. He's going to be so incredibly fun to watch. In Rich Rod's offensive system, it's going to be absolutely ridiculous. So if you don't do anything else, if you don't capture anything else from this West Virginia first look, it is get a chance to watch a West Virginia football game and watch Cam Cook run the ball. He's an absolutely special football player, and I can't wait to see him get more national attention because he's at an overall bigger school than Jacksonville State. But the G6ers definitely know about Cam Cook because G6ers overarchingly they know ball. Now, defensive side of the ball, I could arguably say that the defensive side of the ball has been transformed pretty significantly as well, bringing in a grand total of I'm looking at 6 defensive starters at least from the transfer portal. So the defense is going to look different here, which hopefully leads to improvement again if things end up gelling, and that's the key. Getting all of those defensive parts to gel, right? So defensive line, for example, they bring in Ezekiel Durham Campbell, an edge rusher from Coastal Carolina. Decent year for the Chanticleers in 2025. It's going to give him a little bit more juice and will, at the very least, be a rotational player. I think he has a real chance of starting on this West Virginia defensive line this upcoming season. And then how about an intriguing player in Will LeBlanc, interior defensive lineman from Texas Permian Basin. I don't even think that's the Division 1 school, let alone an FCS or a G6 program. But he did have 5 TFLs from the interior defensive line, so I am very intrigued by how things are going to go, if Will LeBlanc's going to have a meaningful impact, or if he's just going to be a depth piece. Again, I mean, if you're getting 5 TFLs as an interior defensive lineman when you're constantly being double teamed, there is always a chance that Will LeBlanc could burst onto the scene and be a starter and could maybe have that breakout season that no one is expecting. So something to definitely keep an eye on there as well. Then linebacker Tyler Stockley transfers in from Florida Atlantic, 90 tackles. Dude flies all over the field. I think Tyler Stockley is going to be loved pretty quickly up there in Morgantown as well. And then the secondary has been completely transformed as well. Jair Rollison from Kent State has starter potential in this defensive secondary, and that's even with a few other players that they brought in from the portal. Andrew Powdrell was a bright spot from UNLV, at least from a defensive standpoint. Had 63 tackles, and then Kamari Wilson transfers from Memphis, ends up not following Ryan Silverfield to Arkansas, instead coming to Morgantown instead. Multiple interceptions, 6.5 TFLs, plays a little bit of everything, combat jack of all trades from the safety position. And so this secondary is going to be pretty transformed. And so, like I mentioned, this team, you got an experienced head coach. You have a roster where, at least on paper, it looks like it's a better roster, but is it going to gel? And so when you look at his record prediction, I've talked very positively about West Virginia football, but it's also why I can't be super high on them going into this season either, because you are talking about a significant number of pieces that are going to have to pull together. Let me show you what I mean here. So, pulling the schedule up, I do think they get off to a 2-0 start. Coastal Carolina and UT Martin. I think those are going to be some relative layups here. I think West Virginia does at least start 2-0. Now, beyond that, after those 2 games, it does get a little harder, particularly with some of the road games that they have. They got some tough road games in Big 12 conference play. They played TCU on the road, and TCU, I think, is a pretty good football team. Maybe a little bit underrated, maybe with some of the comments made by the TCU coaching staff, as well as losing Josh Hoover to Indiana as well. But TCU is still going to be pretty good. Playing Texas Tech on the road too. I know that they lost Brandon Sorsby, so quarterback position might become a little bit of a question depending on when Will Hammond's able to play and if Lamont Jones is actually as good as advertised. But he was originally supposed to be the quarterback free, so you just don't know. But there's still a really good roster in place in Texas Tech, and you got to go play them on the road. Utah on the road to end the season. That's going to be a tough one as well. Utah, underrated home environment. Especially they don't get talked about enough. But man, that's an underrated home environment. And Morgan Scalley, he understands Utah football. He's been around there since 2007, has never left. Always stay by Kyle Whittingham's side. And even with this information, you're still looking at, hey, still a really good football program, right? So road games are brutal. Home games are a little bit easier though. Cincinnati at home, who just lost Brandon Sorsby. Kansas is at home. I think we know what Kansas football is at this point. They're trying to be respectable, but more of a basketball school. Houston, because you have Houston at home, that's a winnable game. Oklahoma State, going to be an improved football team, but you still get them at home as well. So I think there is a path here where, hey, West Virginia could absolutely maybe get to 8-4 and be a really competitive team in the Big 12. I think realistically, they're probably hovering around bowl eligibility, which is not bad. You're making progress. You're starting to see that foundation start to take shape. And then, really, in 2027, once you understand what that foundation is going to be moving forward, you don't have to get so many players from the transfer portal. And then you could see this West Virginia program take off years down the line, or at least next year down the line, more specifically. But right now, I got them in about 5-7. Not a lot of safe wins here, though. It's going to be a lot of competitive games, decent number of swing games on here. So there is a disaster where they don't come together at all, and they have multiple injuries across the starting lineup, or at least a significant number. It could get ugly in Morgantown in year number 2 under Rich Rod. But hey, that's what I'm looking at right now. A team that, yet again, I do have as my 61st ranked football team in college football coming into this season. Coming in with that 5-7 record, I think ultimately wins a few games at Big 12, just generally competitive in the Big 12. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts, though. Are you thinking that am I a little too high on this West Virginia football team? I'm a little bit too low. I'm very curious to always hear your thoughts down in the comments section below. And if you enjoyed this breakdown of West Virginia football, I need you to do me a couple of favors real fast. Go ahead and hit that like button, and then also hit that subscribe button as well if you do happen to be brand new to the channel. This is Jake from College Football Red Zone signing off. Hoping you guys are all out there having a good one. Take care, everybody.